Hey everyone and welcome back. Are you ready to get a little heated today?
Sounds a bit toasty. What are we diving into today?
We're taking a trip to hell.
Oh, wow. Okay, a bit of a heavy subject, huh?
Well, figuratively speaking, of course. You all wanted to learn about the concept of hell across different cultures and time periods, and wow, is it a fascinating topic.
It really is. It's something that's captivated human imagination for centuries.
Exactly. And we're going to use this really awesome YouTube video as our guide. It's from the Humanities Power Plant channel, and it goes deep on how different cultures have viewed hell.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one. I really liked how they looked at not just the religious dogma, but also how hell is used as a metaphor for human experience and societal issues.
That's exactly what makes it so cool. We're not just going to be talking about fire and brimstone, but also what hell represents psychologically, socially, all of that.
That's a great angle, and I think it makes the topic way more relatable and thought-provoking.
For sure. So to kick things off, what are some of the common threads that run through all the different concepts of hell? What are the core things that define it regardless of where or when we're looking at it?
Okay, well, at its most basic, almost every culture sees hell as a place of punishment after you die for, wrongdoing during your life.
Right, that makes sense. You do bad things, you get punished.
Yeah, and it's not just like a slap on the wrist either. The imagery used to depict this suffering is meant to scare the living daylights out of you. We're talking fire, ice, darkness, monsters, eternal torment. It's designed to tap into our deepest fears.
Like Dante's Inferno. I mean, those images are so vivid and disturbing.
Exactly. Think about all the movies and video games that use these same tropes. Fiery pits, demons, torture chambers. It's like this universal language of fear.
Yeah. Like we're collectively obsessed with this idea of ultimate suffering.
And another key element is the permanence of the punishment. This isn't like a timeout. It's timelessness, an eternity of suffering. The idea that it never ends, that's what makes it so terrifying.
That's way worse than any finite punishment, even if it was really, really bad.
And to make matters worse, the punishments are often tailor-made to fit the crime.
Oh yeah, like in Dante, right? Each circle of hell was reserved for a specific sin.
Exactly. So gluttony might be punished with eternal hunger, or dishonesty with never-ending shame and exposure. It's almost like a cosmic justice system where every sin has a perfectly matched punishment.
Okay, so we've got this baseline for hell. Intense, personalized suffering, and it never ends. But I bet things get more interesting when we look at how specific cultures have put their own spin on it.
Absolutely. And a great place to start is ancient Greece and their underworld, Hades.
Hades. Okay, so this is where things get kind of interesting, right? Because it challenges a lot of our assumptions about hell.
Big time. And see, the thing about Hades is it wasn't really about moral judgment in the same way that we think about hell. It was more about the natural order of things.
Wait, so everyone just ended up in Hades? Good or bad? Didn't matter?
In a way, yes, everyone died and went to the underworld, but that didn't mean it was a uniform experience. There were different realms within Hades.
Okay, so it's not just one big gloomy pit.
Not exactly. For example, there was Elysium, which was reserved for the righteous, the heroes, exceptionally virtuous people. Imagine, like, fields of bliss, sunshine, a pretty good afterlife.
That doesn't sound too bad. So where did everyone else end up?
Well, most people ended up in Asphodel Meadows, which was kind of like this neutral, in-between place. Not blissful, not torturous, just kind of there.
And what about the really bad folks? They weren't hanging out in Elysium with the heroes, right?
Definitely not. For the worst offenders, those who committed really heinous crimes, there was Tartarus. And yeah, Tartarus was pretty much what you'd expect, a place of punishment and suffering.
So even in Hades, there was some sense of cosmic justice going on. What else is interesting about the Greek underworld?
Well, there are the 5 rivers, which are super interesting. Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, is particularly symbolic. When souls drank from it, they forgot their past lives.
Whoa, that's deep. It makes you think about what the Greeks believed about death, doesn't it?
It really does. Like, maybe it suggests this need to let go of earthly attachments and enter the afterlife with a clean slate, a fresh start.
That's a cool way to look at it. It's not just about punishment, but about moving on.
Right. And then you've got Charon, the ferryman who demanded a coin to cross the river Styx. It's a classic example of how their beliefs about the afterlife impacted their everyday life, even down to their burial practices.
Exactly. They actually buried people with coins to pay Charon. And I love the fact that they had these 3 judges who decided the fate of the dead. It makes it feel more than a legal system, right?
Absolutely. It's not just random torment, but a kind of order, a deliberation to it.
So ancient Greece gives us this surprisingly nuanced picture of the afterlife. It's not quite heaven or hell as we often think of them, but I have a feeling things are going to get a lot more intense as we move into the world of organized religion.
Oh yeah, that's where things really heat up.
Pun intended.
Maybe just a little.
All right, so let's talk religion. And when we think about hell, it's often the fiery version from Christianity that comes to mind first, right?
Yeah, Christianity really brought hell to the forefront.
Let's dive into that right after we take a quick break. So Christianity, When we think of hell, it's often the fiery Christian version that pops into our heads first.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Christianity definitely put hell on the map. Big time.
And it's all about eternal damnation, being separated from God, and the last judgment, right?
You got it. The stakes are super high in Christianity. It's not just about ending up in a gloomy place like Hades. It's about suffering forever because of sin.
Whoa, that adds a whole new level of intensity to it.
It totally does. Sin and its consequences become like the central theme. And the way hell is described, burning lakes, gnashing teeth, unbearable heat, it's all meant to evoke intense fear.
Yeah, no kidding. Those images are scary.
Exactly. It's a pretty visceral portrayal, you know? It was designed to keep people on the straight and narrow.
But it's interesting, right? Because even within Christianity, there are different ways of understanding hell.
Oh, for sure. Some people take it very literally, while others see it more as a metaphor for spiritual anguish, being separated from God's love.
So there's a spectrum of interpretations. But no matter how you slice it, the core idea that our actions have consequences, even after we die, that remains pretty consistent.
Absolutely. And this idea of hell as a place of divine punishment, it's not unique to Christianity either.
Really? So other religions have similar concepts?
Yeah, Islam, for example, also has a well-defined concept of hell called Jahannam, or Nar.
And is it similar to the Christian hell?
Yeah, there are definitely similarities. Like, the Christian version, Jahannam is depicted as this realm of intense physical torment and regret.
Fire and brimstone again.
Pretty much. But here's where it gets interesting. In Islam, there's this idea that some people can eventually be purified, even after being in hell, and then they can enter paradise.
So there's like a glimmer of hope, even in the face of this pretty serious punishment.
Right, so it's not necessarily about eternal suffering for everyone.
Okay, that makes sense. What about Eastern religions, like Buddhism? Do they have their own version of hell?
They do, but it's a bit different. In Buddhism, Naraka, sometimes called the hell realm, is part of this larger cycle of death and rebirth known as samsara.
Oh, right, samsara, the cycle of reincarnation.
Exactly. So in Buddhism, suffering in Naraka is linked to karma, which is basically the consequences of your actions.
So it's not about divine judgment, but more about the natural consequences of your actions playing out over multiple lifetimes.
You got it. What you do in this life echoes into the next, and so on.
And so Naraka, is it permanent?
No, that's the key difference. It's temporary, not a final destination. Eventually, even those who end up in Naraka can purify their karma and be reborn into a more favorable realm.
So it's not about eternal damnation.
Nope. It's more like a really, really unpleasant stopover.
Okay, that makes sense. So Christianity and Islam have a more permanent hell, while in Buddhism and Hinduism, it's part of this cycle of rebirth.
Exactly. They're fundamentally different ways of thinking about suffering and what happens after we die.
It's fascinating how different cultures have such different interpretations of the afterlife, right?
It's incredibly diverse. But even though the specifics vary, the idea of hell usually serves a similar purpose across religions.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
It's like a warning sign, a deterrent against wrongdoing, a reminder to live a moral life.
Right. Like a giant cosmic be good or else.
Aha, yeah, something like that.
You know what's really interesting to me, though? The Buddhist hell, the way it's structured, it's so intricate, so systematic.
Oh, you mean the 8 hot hells and the 8 cold hells?
Yeah, it's almost like a carefully designed moral education program, not just random suffering.
That's a really insightful observation. You're picking up on something important there.
So tell me more. I'm kind of fascinated by this idea of hell as a learning experience.
All right, well, in Buddhist cosmology, there's this elaborate process of judgment. It starts with the 10 kings who basically assess what you did during your life.
Oh, wow, like a cosmic courtroom.
Pretty much. And each king presides over a specific period after you die.
They're like reviewing your case file, seeing what you've been up to.
Exactly. And based on their evaluation, they determine what realm you'll go to, and that could include one of the hells.
So there are different hells for different offenses.
You got it. And the punishments in each are incredibly specific and sometimes very creative.
Okay, I have to hear this. Let's start with the hot hells. What are we talking about here?
All right, well, first you have reviving hell. Just when you think you can't take any more pain, you're revived to experience it all over again.
Oh my God, that sounds awful.
Then there's black line hell, where your body is sliced open with burning hot lines.
Ouch, that's rough.
Yeah, and it goes on and on. Crushing hell, where you're squeezed between hot iron objects. Wailing hell, full of boiling water. Great wailing hell, which is even hotter. Then we have burning hell, where flames scorch your senses. Great burning hell, with even more intense flames. And finally, the most severe, unrelenting hell, or avices. The suffering there is constant, no escape whatsoever.
Unrelenting. Just the name sends shivers down my spine. It's like they really went all out with those names, huh? You get a pretty clear picture just hearing them.
And we haven't even gotten to the cold hells.
Wait, there are cold hells too.
8 of them. And these are all about psychological torment, extreme cold, and isolation.
So not just fire, but ice too.
Exactly. It's like, imagine being trapped in a frozen wasteland, your skin cracking from the cold, or your body slowly freezing and then shattering.
Whoa, okay. That is just as terrifying as the fire, but in a completely different way.
It is, and they have these equally descriptive names: the blistering hell, the bursting hell, even a lotus hell where your skin cracks like a frozen lotus flower.
I don't think I'll be forgetting that image anytime soon.
It's pretty intense. But remember, even in the Buddhist hells, the suffering isn't just about punishment.
It's not?
Nope, it's ultimately about learning from your mistakes and purifying your karma. So it's less about eternal damnation and more like a cosmic timeout, a chance to reflect and do better.
That's a really interesting perspective. It really makes you think about how these ideas of hell, whether literal or metaphorical, shape how we understand good and bad, right?
Absolutely. It's about morality, justice, and even the meaning of life itself.
And that brings us to some even deeper questions about how this idea of hell has moved beyond religion and become this powerful metaphor in modern thought.
Oh yeah, it's a metaphor we use all the time to describe all sorts of unpleasant things, like traffic was hell or work is a living hell.
Exactly. It's more than just an exaggeration, though. It's about tapping into this deep collective understanding of what it means to suffer.
Right, and philosophers, sociologists, artists, they've all picked up on this metaphorical power of hell and used it in really interesting ways. We'll have to save that conversation for after the break.
So we were talking about how the idea of hell gets used as a metaphor, and it's everywhere, right?
Oh yeah, it's definitely not limited to religion anymore.
Like, we use the word hell all the time to describe things we hate, right?
This traffic is hell. My inbox is a hellscape.
Exactly. But it's tapping into something deeper than just, an everyday annoyance.
Right. Think about it. Philosophers have used hell to talk about inner turmoil, that feeling of being completely isolated, existential angst, all that heavy stuff.
So it's not a physical place, but more like a state of mind, a psychological state of suffering.
Exactly. Like Jean-Paul Sartre's famous quote, "Hell is other people."
Ooh, yeah, that one's a classic.
It's all about how our relationships with others can actually be the source of our greatest torment.
Which, let's be honest, can be true sometimes. And I've noticed that sociologists also use the term hell to describe societal problems.
Oh, absolutely. They talk about hellish conditions created by poverty, war, discrimination, all these things that cause real suffering here and now.
Yeah, it's a reminder that sometimes the most hellish experiences aren't in some afterlife, but right here on Earth.
And artists and writers, they've definitely picked up on that idea too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You see it in literature, art, film, even music.
Think of dystopian novels, for example. They often depict societies that have literally become hell on Earth.
Yeah, or painting it to depict scenes of suffering and torment. It's like they're using those images and ideas of hell to make us think critically about the world we live in.
Exactly. And even within religion, you see some people moving away from a literal interpretation of hell.
So it's less about fire and brimstone and more about something else.
Right. It becomes more about the consequences of bad actions, the idea that if you stray too far from what's right, you end up creating a kind of personal hell for yourself.
It's almost like a metaphor for losing your way, for being disconnected from something bigger than yourself.
That's a really interesting way to put it. It's not so much about punishment, but about the potential for spiritual growth, for finding your way back to, well, whatever you consider to be good.
Wow, that is so much to think about. We've gone from fire and brimstone to, deep philosophical questions about the human condition.
It's been quite a journey, and it really shows how this idea of hell, whether we believe in it literally or not, has shaped our understanding of morality, justice, even the meaning of life.
It's endlessly fascinating. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into hell, what's the big takeaway here? What should we be thinking about?
I think the biggest takeaway is that hell, regardless of how you interpret it, is ultimately a reflection of ourselves.
Whoa. Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, whether we see it as a literal place or a metaphor, it forces us to confront those aspects of our lives and our world that feel the most hellish.
Yeah, the things that cause suffering, the things that we fear, the things we try to avoid.
Exactly. And by facing those things head on, we can start to create a world that's a little less hellish, both for ourselves and for everyone else.
That is a powerful thought. It's not just about fearing hell, but about working towards a better future. Thanks for taking this hellish trip with us.
Anytime. It was a fascinating conversation.
And to all of you listening, we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. See you next time.